Growing up, I thought my family was relatively normal, though I wouldn't say it was perfect. My dad was the steady, reliable one, a hard-working accountant who put his family above everything else. He was the kind of man who didn't just talk about his values, but lived them. He was my role model, the person I looked up to most. My mom, on the other hand, was a bit more self-absorbed. Don't get me wrong, she wasn't neglectful. She made sure I was fed, clothed, and that my basic needs were met. But she wasn't emotionally present in the same way my dad was. Her priorities leaned more toward maintaining her social life and keeping up appearances. She always seemed more invested in impressing her friends and neighbors than in spending meaningful time with me. Growing up, I didn't think much of it. It was just the way things were. Then there was my mom's brother, Uncle Mike. He was the black sheep of the family, but him and my mother were very close. While my dad was the epitome of stability, Mike was the exact opposite. Unpredictable, manipulative, and always involved in some sort of drama and problems. He'd been in and out of trouble for most of his life, including a stint in jail for fraud. Despite his shady past, my mom always stood by him. "He's family," she'd say. "We have to stick together." Dad tolerated Mike, but I could tell he didn't trust him. Over the years, I began to see why. When I was 18, my dad passed away suddenly from a heart attack. It was the single most devastating moment of my life. He had always been my rock, the person I turned to for advice, support, and reassurance. Without him, I felt like my entire world had been flipped upside down. One of the few things that gave me a sense of security during that difficult time was knowing that Dad had planned for my future. He had been saving diligently for years to ensure I could go to college without the burden of debt. He talked often about how important education was to him and how he wanted me to have opportunities he never did. The college fund was his legacy, and it meant everything to me. But just a few months before his passing, that security was ripped away from me. I sat down with my mom to discuss college, how to access the fund, which school to choose, and so on. That's when she dropped a bombshell. She wasn't going to let me use the money. Instead, she had decided to give it to my cousin, Lisa, 17 female, daughter of Uncle Mike, so she could attend a prestigious private university. Her reasoning? Lisa had better grades and more potential, and Uncle Mike had convinced her that investing in Lisa's education would benefit the family more. "Lisa's got a real chance to make something of herself," Mom said. "You'll figure something out. You're smart and a man. That's what men do for their family. They prioritize women's well-being." I was stunned. That money was meant for me. My dad had worked tirelessly to save it for my future. I argued with her, but she dismissed me, saying I was being selfish and didn't understand the bigger picture. She said I could always get scholarships or take out loans if I wanted to go to college so badly. Furious and desperate, I told her that if she gave away my college fund, I would sue her. I didn't know much about the legalities, but I was willing to try anything to stop her. My threat must have shaken her, because she told me she needed time to think about it. A few days later, she told Uncle Mike she wouldn't be giving him the money. I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. What followed next would change my life forever. A week later, Uncle Mike showed up at my door unannounced. He wasn't just angry, he was livid. He ranted about how selfish I was for denying Lisa her opportunity, and accused me of being an ungrateful loser and not a real man. I was ready to kick him out when he dropped a bombshell that stopped me in my tracks. "You think you're entitled to that money?" he sneered. "That's rich, coming from someone who isn't even his father's son." I froze. My heart started pounding as he continued. He claimed that my mom had an affair early in her marriage, and that I was the result of that affair. According to him, my dad had found out but chose to forgive her and raise me as his own because he loved me. Uncle Mike, however, had known about the affair all along and had been using it to manipulate my mom for years. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. At first, I thought he was lying just to hurt me, but something about the way he said it, so smug, so confident, made me think otherwise. I demanded he leave, but the damage was done. My mind was racing, and I couldn't shake the feeling that my entire life had been built on a lie. That night, I confronted my mom. At first, she denied everything, but when I told her what Uncle Mike had said, she broke down and admitted it. She confessed that she had an affair with her coworker early in her marriage, and that I was the result. She claimed my dad had been a good man who chose to forgive her and raise me as his own because he loved me and didn't want to destroy our family. But she also admitted that Uncle Mike had been blackmailing her for years, threatening to expose the truth if she didn't comply with his demands. When I asked why she was so willing to give away my college fund, she said she felt like she had no choice. "He would have told you everything," she sobbed. "I was trying to protect you." Her excuse didn't invoke any sympathy. All I could feel was anger. She had betrayed my dad's memory, lied to me my entire life, and nearly destroyed my future just to appease her manipulative brother. After that confrontation, I knew I couldn't stay in that toxic environment any longer. I demanded access to the college fund, threatening legal action again if necessary. This time, Mom didn't fight me. She handed over the account details, and I withdrew the money. With the funds secured, I packed my bags and left. I moved to another state, where I enrolled in a university and began rebuilding my life. It wasn't easy. Starting over rarely is, but it was the best decision I ever made. Away from my mom and Uncle Mike's influence, I was finally able to focus on myself and my future. Now, at 26, I have a stable career in tech, a nice apartment, and a comfortable savings account. I haven't heard from my mother since. I just know that my uncle revealed her secrets to all family, and now they don't talk to each other anymore. A few months ago, my mom reached out to me, asking for financial support. She claimed she was struggling to pay her bills and had no one else to turn to. Her voice cracked as she tried to guilt-trip me, saying it was my duty as a son to take care of her. I laughed bitterly and told her she had lost the right to ask for my help when she betrayed my dad's wishes and my future. I reminded her that she had the chance to support me when I needed her most, but she chose to prioritize her brother and his daughter instead. She cried and begged, saying she had made mistakes, but still deserved compassion. I told her to ask Uncle Mike, or my biological father, for help if she was so desperate. Then I hung up and blocked her number. Am I the a-hole? OP's mom didn't just betray OP's dad. She betrayed OP too. Her actions were selfish from the start, lying to OP his entire life, almost giving away the college fund OP's dad worked so hard to save, and continuing to prioritize the manipulative uncle over her own child. OP did the right thing by taking control of his life and cutting toxic people out. OP's dad would be proud of the person OP has become. And now let's hear the community's opinion. I'm sorry, but your mom trying to justify giving away your college fund by claiming she was protecting you is such a load of crap. She wasn't protecting you. She was protecting herself from her own bad decisions. And Uncle Mike, what a piece of work. I'm glad you took the money and left. It sounds like the only way you could have escaped that toxic environment. Also, kudos to your dad for being a stand-up guy despite everything. He's the real hero here. Not the a-hole. Your mom had so many opportunities to come clean, to stand up for you, and to honor your dad's wishes. But she chose to lie and enable your uncle instead. It's incredible that you've managed to turn things around and build a successful life, despite everything they put you through. As for your mom asking for help now, nope. Actions have consequences. She made her bed, now she has to lie in it. Don't let anyone guilt you into thinking otherwise. Wow, what a story. First of all, not the a-hole at all. Second, I just want to say how much I admire your resilience. You didn't let any of this mess derail you. You stood up for yourself, took control of your future, and built a life your dad would be proud of. Your mom and uncle don't deserve a second chance, and honestly, it's better for your mental health to keep them at arm's length. I dated my ex Jane for about 7 years. During that time, I got pretty close to her divorced parents, especially her father Dan. My dad died when I was young, and Dan played somewhat of a parental role model for me, which I really appreciated. I broke up with Jane about 4 months ago because it was clear our futures no longer aligned. A few weeks ago, Dan passed away, which I was and still am very upset about. It turns out that he updated his will about 1 year ago and actually left me about $150K. We were dating at the time. I had no clue he did this. In the will, I wasn't referred to as his daughter's partner. It just named me. He also left money to Jane, her siblings, his own siblings, and some to charity. After his death, this all came out, and I was very surprised that he left me anything, but I was grateful. It's not a ton of money, but it will be enough for a nice down payment on a house and some savings. Since it came out, though, Jane and her siblings are absolutely pissed and are demanding I give the money back to them and deny what was left to me. My friend is an attorney who works with inheritances and says I'm absolutely in the clear. He said if it mentioned me as Jane's partner, They might have somewhat of a case, but because it didn't, I'm totally fine. I have some mixed feelings on keeping it, but it will be a huge help to me, so I'm leaning towards keeping it. Am I the a-hole if I do? Not the a-hole. It really does sound like Dan wanted you to have the money, independent of your relationship with Jane, because he'd come to like you and wanted to support you in your own right. Not the a-hole. The fact that he didn't mention you as a partner in the will says to me that he obviously thought very highly of you and was prepared to give you the money whether you were with his daughter or not. Enjoy the money and the memories you have of him. Her family may not like it, but as mentioned by a lawyer, you're in the clear. Not the a-hole, and personally I think he meant for you to have it either way. If he meant it to be a shared asset with you and girlfriend, he would have named both of you, or left it just to her. He had 4 months to change his will if he really didn't want you to have it. $150K is a ton of money, so I'm just going to say that if it's not a ton of money to you, maybe consider helping out someone that it would mean something to, as a lasting legacy to a person who was like a father figure to you. Maybe big brothers and sisters. My 40 female, boyfriend, 36 male, have been together for 2 years. We have a great relationship. We agree on most things. He is very loving and considerate, and overall the love of my life. We recently bought our first home together, which I was hoping would be a fresh start. For context, he and his wife were married for 12 years, shortly before we started dating. Sadly, she passed. In my opinion, I've been very considerate of his grief and supportive of how he chooses to grieve her. For the first 14 months of our relationship, he had an 8x10 picture of the two of them on the mantle in the living room, which I was understanding of, especially since I moved into his apartment that they had shared together. After 14 months, it was Christmas time, and I removed it to decorate, with his permission. Fast forward to now. We've been in our new home that we bought together for about a month now, and are beginning to decorate. She was a service member, and he wants her folded flag to stay in the living room on display, which I support. However, we have another sitting room with many bookshelves, and he wants to have their photo together on display in that room. I understand the pain of losing a spouse. I am also widowed. I know how devastating and empty it can feel. But I simply would like for this home to be a fresh start for the both of us. It's free of trauma and heartbreak, and I want it to be our place together. I do not wish for him to get rid of the photo, just not display it in our main living areas. This is really an issue for him and is causing him lots of stress, and he is becoming increasingly emotional and depressed. We cannot come to an agreement or move past it. It's all causing lots of tension in our relationship that neither of us want. We aren't aggressive and basically never fight, so this issue is hard for us to navigate. I've also noticed he still keeps 2 photos of her in his nightstand drawer and a few other keepsakes. I've stayed silent about it all, except for the picture he wants to display. I understand he wants to cherish her memory, and I know had she not passed, they'd still be happily together. But given the circumstances, I want to move forward. Am I the a-hole? No a-hole. Your husband is still grieving. He was married to his first wife for 12 years, and he wants to cherish her by displaying her memory in the living room. At the same time, you're widowed too, but the difference is that you want to forget your past so you can have a fresh start at your new home. You need to sit down and talk with your husband about this and come up with a compromise. Maybe you won't have it in the living room, but it would be good to put in the bedroom. OP, your husband does not want to forget her yet, and you need to understand that. He loves you, but needs to cherish his first wife's memory. No a-hole. You and he began dating soon after his wife's death, it seems, and you moved into their apartment less than a year after her death. Is that right? He has not properly grieved the loss of his wife. He did not give himself enough time to fully comprehend his grief. He may be feeling guilt for being with you, like he thinks he has dishonored her memory by being with you. The agreement about displaying the photograph and flag and his insistence they be prominent in the shared space of your new home is an indication he may benefit from grief counseling or couples counseling for both of you. You are not wrong for wanting him to have a more private display for his wife's flag and photos. This is your home and your living space, not a shrine to his dead wife. You are not expecting him to hide or discard the items. You just want him to keep them in a more private space. This is a reasonable request. Suggesting he speak with a grief counselor might be a good plan. No a-hole. He's not ready to be in a relationship with you. You said you got together shortly after she died. I think you are a rebound. You're a placeholder. You are company so he won't be alone. He's showing you that her ghost takes priority in his home with you. Please listen to what he's showing you. He's never going to be the man you want him to be because he's still hers. My wife, Kim, 36 female, and I, 33 male, just got married, but have been together for 7 years. We've been engaged the past 3 years. I met a lot of her family during our relationship. With the exception of her parents and one aunt, the rest have been polite, but aloof when I've seen them. Her parents and aunt have always been very nice, warm, and welcoming, and treated me like family once it became clear we were serious about each other. The first couple years it didn't bother me. What did start to bother me was when we were living together and engaged. The holiday cards would be sent and they'd be addressed only to Kim, whereas her brothers' and sisters' cards were addressed to her siblings and their spouses. Her parents had invited me to some outings with the family, only to have the invitation rescinded because aunts, uncles, cousins didn't want non-family members there. Kim would get invited to birthday parties or cookouts, and I wouldn't be. And that's fair enough since it was their parties, and they get to pick their guests. The only times I've had to interact with them was at things hosted by Kim, her parents, or the good aunt. The straw that broke the camel's back for me was last year. My mother-in-law sadly passed away. Come the funeral, I was not allowed to sit with Kim. When the surviving family members were read aloud, I was not listed, yet her sister's new husband she'd been with less than 2 years was, and other new additions that had been around less time than I have, and they were seated in the family section. I didn't say anything about it, but afterwards, Kim asked if she had heard right or if I had been left off the list. We visited her dad that night and he apologized to us. He let his 2 sisters handle all the arrangements for the funeral, and they had made the list, and their reasoning was that I wasn't family since Kim and I weren't married. We didn't raise a stink about it and just let it be. Now, we've recently had our wedding, and it was great. I'm stoked to finally be married to the woman I love. When we were making our guest list, Kim asked about her family members that had always been aloof to me. I told her if she wanted to invite them, I'd support her in that, but I wouldn't interact with them. She wanted to keep peace, so she invited them. At the reception, it was like a switch had been flipped in them. They were bubbly, friendly, and kept trying to hug me and welcome me to the family. But I ignored them in favor of talking to friends and family. At one point, the aunts cornered Kim and I when we were going around thanking people for coming, and asked Kim why she married a prick. I told them I just don't want anything to do with people who basically ignored me until we were married, and Kim agreed with me. They gossiped about it some more the rest of the evening, and some days after on Facebook posts. Initially, I didn't think I was doing anything wrong, but I do feel bad that it affected Kim, too. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. They are allowed to be old-fashioned, and you are allowed to not deal with them. Not the a-hole. People don't get to treat you like a non-person for 7 years, and then pretend that never happened. If you were a new relationship of less than a year, sure, maybe some exclusion would make sense. But that's not your situation. They had 7 years to welcome you. Their loss. Nope, not the a-hole. They're allowed to treat you using whatever arcane rules they wanted to for invites to their events. But that didn't mean there wouldn't be consequences for their actions. I'm not sure why you invited them to the wedding at all. Why invite them to keep the peace if you weren't going to actually do so at the wedding? Personally, I wouldn't have invited them to begin with. Once you were engaged, their behavior became unreasonable and incredibly rude. And to not let you sit with Kim at the funeral? That's just despicable. And they didn't invite you to birthday parties and cookouts because you weren't married? What the duck? Did Kim go to them without you? We have some background here. My sister-in-law is my brother's second wife, and she is the stepmother to his 3 kids, ages 17, 15, and 14. My brother, Sam, lost his first wife when the kids were very small and remarried quickly, in part because he did not want to be alone and also because he did not want his kids to grow up without a mom. They've been married for 10 years now, and the 3 kids in question do not call sister-in-law mom. They do not want anyone else to call her their mom either. She is the mother of my 2 nephews with my brother, but the discussion in question is regarding the older 3. My brother and sister-in-law went to therapy with the kids, out of concern that children so young were so resistant to calling a new mother figure mom, someone who loved them and was genuinely there wanting the best for them. They ended up blaming their maternal family for the lack of title for sister-in-law, and attempted to cut them out of the children's lives when the maternal family refused to tell the kids they wanted them to call sister-in-law mom because she was the mom now. The courts were brought in, and that put a stop to removing contact. Over the years, the kids have been corrected many times. There have also been many punishments given out because the kids rebel against sister-in-law and have said things to hurt her. It's basically one big fight at their house. The rest of my family are kind of mixed on all this, and some feel like Sam and sister-in-law are wrong to push, But others believe something is amiss because the kids have not mellowed out towards sister-in-law at all and still refuse to have anyone speak about her as their mom. I think they also believe their maternal side of the family are to blame and that they believe they are wrong for not encouraging it. I have spoken to my nephew and nieces. I know their mom's family have never said anything. What they do is talk about their mom and share her memory with them, and it led to a connection forming through the maternal family. I think it's unfair to keep pushing them to call sister-in-law mom, and I think a focus should have been put on giving them a happy home life versus pushing for something the kids have expressed they do not want. A few days ago, Sam and sister-in-law were talking to our family about the kids going back to school and how my 14-year-old niece corrected the school admin who referred to sister-in-law as her mom. Sister-in-law talked about how upset she was and how she doesn't understand how the kids can still be so wrong on this. Sam said he wanted to pull out his hair. I suggested, and not for the first time, that they should come to terms with the reality of things. Sam said the reality is sister-in-law is their mom and has been for 10 years. I told them the reality is sister-in-law is not their mom, she's their stepmother, and you can't force feelings on that to change. I am now considered the a-hole. They said I only hurt sister-in-law more and rubbed her face in the rejection by saying it. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. If the kids were 7, 5, and 4 when they lost their mother, then they were old enough to have coherent memories and a proper relationship with her. Therefore, it's ludicrous for your brother and sister-in-law to think that they can just wipe her away and install sister-in-law as mommy. Wanting to be considered a mother figure is understandable, but the notion that she is their mom is insulting to the memory of your brother's late wife. And if I were those kids, I'd be really put off too. Sister-in-law needs to back the heck off, or those kids are going to hate her guts forever. Not the a-hole. They're calling you an a-hole because you're saying a truth sister-in-law doesn't want to hear. That 10 years later, the ship is well and truly sailed, and they'll never call her mother. They're pointing fingers at the maternal family, but honestly, I think brother and sister-in-law dug the majority of the grave themselves from violently trying to pry the kids from their presumably loved grandparents, and for all the punishments they'd given out over the years. I wouldn't want anything to do with either of them after all those stunts, and would probably get way too much satisfaction from denying sister-in-law all the time. If bro and sister-in-law are throwing such a hissy fit now, I'm dreading the meltdown that will happen when the kiddos hit 18 and run for the hills. Not the a-hole. Yikes, though. I think the sister-in-law and your brother need more therapy to get down to the root of why they are so fixated on the 3 kids calling her mom, and not by her name. They need to be doing whatever makes the kids comfortable and honor their real mother. No ifs, ands, or buts. I'm a 25-year-old Indian woman. I have 2 older brothers, 38 and 24. I was married off at 18 to my ex-husband. He was 26 then. My parents had to give less dowry as my in-laws wanted to marry off ex in a hurry. After marriage, all I had to do was cook a meal, stay with my mother-in-law during the day, and have S with my husband at night. Then I found out my husband was cheating on me with his long-term girlfriend. I told mother-in-law. I was asked to ignore it or make sure he loved me so he would not stray. His girlfriend got married. Husband started sleeping with everyone that he could and drinking. I was blamed for his behavior. After 2 years, we realized I was not getting pregnant and could not get pregnant. Not gonna lie, I was relieved. My in-laws were not. Nobody would talk to me. I spent my days in silence. My mother was happy I was married off. She did not care for my problems. My father could not care less as his responsibility was done. Then father died. Older brother moved back to India. I saw him after my wedding for the first time. My father's business is now being handled by my brothers. I was not left any inheritance or shares, but brothers gave me a part of theirs and said I should divorce my husband. Older brother came to my house and created a huge scene and took me to his home. I lived there till my divorce was finalized. I've been divorced for a year now. Brothers bought me a nice apartment to live in. My sister-in-laws are very nice, but I am a failure. I have no brains. All I do is watch K-dramas, cook twice a day, and go to the mall. I tried dating, but got harassed by a man who found out I was a rich divorcee. I sometimes am invited to get-togethers of the community. I do not mince my words when I talk about my husband or my mother. My husband and father-in-law had requested me to keep quiet about divorce, but I went ahead and told everyone I met. When people ask me why I stayed in that situation for so long, I tell them that my mother tattled on me to my husband when I told her what was going on. She gave husband and in-laws permission to take away my phone and to limit my movements. My in-laws are suffering because I'm running my mouth. My mother cannot face anyone in our family. She has not been to any function in the last 8 months. My mother and mother-in-law are calling me a-hole for being shameless. I do not know how wrong or right I am. Not the a-hole. You were the victim of terrible controlling aggression. Your parents didn't care, didn't feel like dealing with it, so told you to keep quiet and pretend it wasn't happening. That's classic aggression, gaslighting. I'm really glad your brothers helped you get out of that situation. I think you'd be best served by trying to find something that would make you happy. Whether that's a career, a partnership, or something else entirely, only you can say. Not the a-hole. I'm not sure culturally, but you tried to seek help and were blamed for seeking help, as well as blamed for your ex's misdeeds. They restricted your movement and did what they could to keep you in an aggressive situation for their own appearances. If they didn't want to look bad, they should have helped you, and now they're facing the consequences of their actions. Once again, not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. Time to look after yourself. Get enrolled in a community college or the equivalent where you live. Build your self-esteem. See if you can get a job. The thing to do now is deciding how you are going to move forward. Don't deal with these people anymore. I imagine there are cultural issues at play here, so I don't know what to advise there. If you can put this marriage and these people behind you, it might be best for you. Your in-laws brought their suffering on themselves. Your mother seems to be suffering because she did not support you. The question is whether she feels bad about not being on your side, or people finding out that she was not on your side. Your brothers and sister-in-law sound wonderful. You'll be fine. Don't be so hard on yourself. My dad passed away when I was 7, leaving my mom to raise me, 28 female, and my younger brother Jake, 22 male, on her own. Losing him was devastating, and I give my mom a lot of credit for holding things together after his death. She worked long hours at a modest job and made sure we had what we needed. But as time went on, it became clear that the way she handled us was vastly different. As the eldest, I was expected to step up and help around the house. Mom leaned on me for everything, cleaning, cooking, looking after Jake, and told me I had to be her little helper. I didn't mind at first because I wanted to make things easier for her. But while I was being raised to be responsible, Jake was being babied to an extreme degree. Mom treated Jake like he was made of glass. She did everything for him, tying his shoes, packing his school bags, cleaning his room, and even completing his homework when he didn't feel like doing it. If Jake misbehaved, she excused it as boys will be boys. If I made a mistake, I was scolded for not being mature enough. Over time, Jake grew up spoiled and entitled, expecting the world to cater to him just like Mom did. By the time I turned 18, I was desperate to escape our small village. Life there felt suffocating, and I wanted more than the limited opportunities the town offered. I worked hard, saved up every penny I could, and moved to the city as soon as I graduated. It wasn't easy at first. I didn't have much money or many connections, but I knew I couldn't stay in that environment any longer. The city was a breath of fresh air. I found a decent job, made friends, and started building a life for myself. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe. But Mom wasn't happy about it. She constantly guilt-tripped me for abandoning her and Jake, even though Jake was now a teenager and perfectly capable of helping her around the house. Not that he ever did. Jake, of course, stayed home, doing nothing with his life and leeching off Mom's hard work. 3 years ago, I met Alex, 32 male, at a friend's party. We clicked immediately. He's an architect, smart, funny, and one of the most thoughtful people I've ever met. He grew up in a loving, supportive family and treats me with a level of care and respect that I'd never experienced before. Alex and I started dating, and over time, our relationship grew stronger. He was always supportive of my ambitions and understanding of the complicated dynamics with my mom and brother. When he met my family, he was polite and kind, but he could immediately see how Mom coddled Jake and expected me to shoulder all the responsibility. Last year, Alex proposed, and I couldn't have been happier. We moved in together shortly after, finding a lovely 2-bedroom apartment in the city. The second bedroom was always intended to be a nursery someday. We both want kids and have been excitedly planning for the future. Mom, however, wasn't thrilled about my new life. She hated that I had moved on and couldn't stand that Jake was still stuck in the same small town. Recently, she decided it was time for Jake to start fresh in the city. The problem? She expected me to make that happen. One day, she called me out of the blue and said, "Jake needs a change. He's going to move to your city to study and find a job. You have that spare bedroom, so he can stay with you and Alex until he gets on his feet." I was floored. Jake had never even mentioned wanting to move to the city, let alone go back to school or find work. This was entirely Mom's idea, and I could tell she expected me to roll over and say yes. When I pointed out that Alex and I were planning to start a family, her response shocked me. "You can have kids later," she said dismissively. "Right now, Jake needs you more. A baby would just cry all the time and distract him from his studies. You'd be doing him a favor by waiting." I told her no. Firmly, but politely, I explained that Jake is a grown adult and not my responsibility. I also reminded her that Alex and I had our own lives and plans that didn't include being Jake's babysitters. That's when she ramped up the guilt tripping. She accused me of being selfish and ungrateful, saying, "I raised you alone after your father died. The least you can do is help your brother. You know how hard things have been for him." I was ready to hang up, but then she said something that pushed me over the edge. "You're young. You can always have kids later. Right now, you need to focus on family." I snapped. "It's too late for that," I said. "I'm pregnant." She started screaming about how irresponsible I was, how I was ruining everything, and how I was prioritizing myself over family. Then, in a moment of pure insanity, she actually suggested I get rid of the baby so Jake could move in and have the space to focus on his studies and sleep. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I told her, in no uncertain terms, to go to hell. I said Jake is an adult who needs to take responsibility for his own life, and that my family, me, Alex, and our baby, comes first, then hung up. Since that conversation, my phone hasn't stopped buzzing. Mom has been calling and texting nonstop, alternating between begging me to reconsider and think about my brother because he can't do it alone. Jake, of course, hasn't said a word. I assume he's sulking because he didn't get his way. But honestly, I don't care. He's 22 years old. He's had every opportunity to grow up and take responsibility for his life, but he's chosen to do nothing. That's not my problem. Alex has been incredibly supportive through all of this. He's furious at how my mom has treated me and has made it clear that Jake is not welcome in our home. "This is our life," he said. "We're starting a family. No one else gets to dictate that." I feel like I've finally drawn a line in the sand, but part of me wonders if I'm being too harsh. Mom's reaction was outrageous, but she's still my mother, and I can't help but feel a pang of guilt for shutting her down so completely. Reddit: am I the a-hole for refusing to delay having kids and letting my spoiled brother move in? OP's mom has spent OP's entire life putting Jake first and expecting OP to pick up the slack. The fact that she suggested OP get rid of her baby to make life more convenient for him is absolutely insane. OP is not responsible for Jake's life. He's 22 and perfectly capable of figuring things out for himself. OP has done the right thing by standing her ground. OP's mom and Jake need to learn that the world doesn't revolve around them. And now let's hear the community's opinion. Wow, just wow. Not the a-hole. Your mom's behavior is so out of line. I don't even know where to start. She's trying to guilt you into sacrificing your happiness, your family, and even your child for the sake of your spoiled brother. You've done everything right, moved out, built a life, and set boundaries. Jake needs to grow up and face the real world, and your mom needs to stop enabling him. Stay strong, OP. You're doing great. Not the a-hole. Your mom is enabling Jake to the point where it's harmful for everyone, including him. What happens when he needs to stand on his own 2 feet? Will she guilt someone else into taking care of him? Good for you for refusing to play along. And major kudos for calling out her outrageous suggestion about your pregnancy. That was beyond inappropriate, and you were 100% justified in telling her to go to hell. Focus on your family. You're not responsible for her or Jake's poor decisions. Absolutely not the a-hole. As a mother myself, I'm horrified at your mom's suggestion to get rid of the baby for Jake's convenience. That's not just selfish, that's downright cruel. You've worked hard to build a life for yourself, and you have every right to prioritize your family. Alex sounds like an amazing partner, and your baby deserves to grow up in a loving, stable home, free of this toxic nonsense. Keep those boundaries firm, and congratulations on your pregnancy. My dad's parents are both self-centered jerks. Their number one priority has always been for people to think they have this perfect family with perfect kids. They didn't care at all about Dad's happiness and just wanted him to be the perfect trophy son who they could rub in their friends' faces. They forced him into activities that made him miserable. My dad got a knee injury that still affects him now from a jerk on the wrestling team that my grandparents forced him to join. They blamed Dad for the jerk's behavior and only cared that he wouldn't be able to do sports anymore. Their falling out happened when my dad stood up to them and told them that he was not going to be a doctor or lawyer. They didn't come to his college graduation or wedding. Dad gave them one last chance to change their ways and be in my life, but they refused because I was being raised by my father and would turn out bad like him. My uncle is 9 years younger than Dad. He also was a natural academic, athlete. So obviously my grandparents were very different parents to him and were thrilled to be grandparents to my cousin V. Now my grandparents are always pissed off with V because she isn't a straight-A cheerleader or whatever they want to impress their friends with. V says they still complain because when V was 6, she did ballet and they could impress their friends with her. V was one of the people who cut her hair to show support for cancer patients at her school's cancer awareness rally. Our grandparents literally threw a temper tantrum because V changed her own hair without their input. My grandparents barely even talked to me before, but they've suddenly been super friendly, only to me. They still ignore my dad and show up to all my events. Whenever they try to make conversation, I just politely say, "That's nice," and that I have to get back home and work on homework. Earlier this week, I had my choir concert where I got 2 solo songs. My grandparents were there, and after the show ended, were loudly saying, "You did so well, honey. That's our grandchild." I tried to again leave by saying I had to go, but they stopped me and said how they just wanted to say they were so heartbroken by V's spiteful rebelling, and how they were so proud of me succeeding, despite your father. This really set me off, so I loudly told them they need to stop pretending to be amazing grandparents when they're only interested in me because their golden grandchild stopped being perfect enough for them. The other attendees pretended not to pay attention, but I noticed several whispering. My grandfather just snapped that they were leaving, and my grandmother looked like she was going to cry. Several acquaintances have said even though the way they did it was unhealthy, my grandparents were ultimately trying to do what they believed would be best for us. And I was out of line to publicly humiliate my elderly grandparents, who, even if misguided, were trying to show support and pride in me. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. They don't care about you. They're just using you. Unless you left some stuff out, you didn't even curse or say anything nasty, just called them on their behavior. Not the a-hole. You are not the one who made this a public issue. They did. Tell the truth to anyone you want. If your grandparents really think they haven't done anything wrong, they won't care. If they feel ashamed because people know about their own actions, that means they believe those actions are shameful. Not the a-hole. A narcissist is a narcissist. Your dad and you are lucky they had a golden child for so long. Create a strong boundary. Don't let them break it. They'll go away shortly after. Not the a-hole. You are not obligated to play along with whatever fantasy world your grandparents have created for themselves and their friends. They sound fake and judgmental. Why on earth would you want them in your life? Good for you for putting a stop to their nonsense. For a bit of background, I've always been the disappointment in my family, and my older and younger sisters were the favorites, especially my older sister, and this was mostly because of grades and subject choices, and eventually career. My sister took all the good subjects, think physics and such, and I did not. After high school, I didn't have the grades for the fancy university in my country, and my parents didn't want to pay for me to go study animation like I wanted. In their eyes, it was not a good job. I tried to convince them, but they didn't change their minds. So I took a year off to work and moved out of my parents' house. The next year, I applied for a 1-year course in IT engineering. After I finished the course, I applied to a lot of jobs, even the ones I did not qualify for, and was lucky enough to get a job that paid well, and they were even kind enough to teach me more things as I worked. And since I had no family to spend time with, and most of my friends from high school were too far or busy to hang with me, I spent most of my extra time working, which paid off because I got a lot of promotions, and now I make about $225K a year. My oldest sister went to university to study engineering and got a job as an engineer, but eventually said she wanted to study and then do law, and has been working as a lawyer. And from what I hear, she is making about $150 to $180K a year, and she was being treated as the golden child. My parents don't know how much I make. My younger sister is in university studying biology, and my parents said they wouldn't pay for her unless she became a real doctor, and she has been studying with a scholarship and has been working for extra cash because my parents don't give her any money, which has made me and her closer because she was now being treated the same way as me, and I've been sending her $7K every month so she can focus on her studies. Now, about 2 weeks ago was my mother's birthday, and she invited me, much to my surprise. Originally, I thought someone was dying or someone needed a kidney and didn't want to go, but my girlfriend said I should go. When I got there, it was nothing but complaining and talking about how much of a success my older sister was. I was determined not to fight and took everything on the chin, but eventually then started doing the same to my younger sister, and she chose the opposite, and basically called them out on their favoritism and told them I was making double what my older sister makes and that I had been sending her money every month for the past 2 years, and all this happened in front of the whole family and all their friends. After all this, I left with my younger sister and started to get phone calls from my parents yelling at me for not telling them how much I made and for not sending them money instead of my useless sister, and calling me an a-hole for not doing so. So, am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. Nope. They backed the wrong horse, and now they get to ride it to the bitter end. They actually did you a favor. Their first response was about money, so you know what they value. Money. Terrible parents, treating their children like future banks. Carry on helping your younger sis. Remember who the parents really are, and spare some sympathy for the golden child who's been groomed into being the horse that carries them. Wow. Just wow. You are absolutely not the a-hole here. Congratulations to you on all of your success and hard work. Only you get to decide what you do with your hard-earned money, and the fact that you're helping your sister when your parents refused is incredibly admirable. It's laughable that your parents think that you should send them money after the way they've treated you and your sister. If I were you, I would walk away and never look back. Not the a-hole, but the sister who champions you. She drove a stake through their worldview with her outburst. You have absolutely no obligation to share your income with anyone if you don't want to. You also have no obligation to send money to parents who refuse to support you in your career goals when they don't appear to have valued you. I think you're great for supporting your younger sister, and you should have a Cheshire cat smile going on because you overcame and aren't the loser they imagined you to be. My, male 25, older sister is planning to get married in the winter. We've had a rocky relationship throughout our childhood. She always was the golden child and was always the overachiever. I was only really naturally good at athletics in high school, but I had to work for everything in the classroom. She was naturally smarter, and her grades were better than me. I guess I was a little insecure because I had to work really hard for something that was natural for her. She constantly let me hear it how she was better at school. We bickered a lot, and my parents usually took her side. It was manageable until the big incident happened. When I was a junior and she was a senior, we were both in relationships. She was dating this questionable guy, and my parents were against their relationship. I was dating this really sweet girl who my parents absolutely loved. My sister got jealous and started sending hateful messages to my girlfriend. Some of the messages included stuff like, "He's immature," or "He's going to cheat on you." My girlfriend broke things off with me, and it really messed with me. After that, me and my sister couldn't talk without arguing. When my sister started planning her wedding, my parents came to me to ask for some money. They didn't save enough for her wedding and needed about $10K. I immediately said of course, because I knew my parents felt guilty about not saving enough. They also helped contribute a bit for my college. I told them to not tell my sister and to keep this discreet. Well, they told my sister hoping it would fix things between us. Immediately after that, my sister blew up my phone telling me that she doesn't need my pity and that this doesn't change things. At that point, I was sick of everyone's crap. I tried to do something nice for the family, and I get treated like crap. The final straw was when my sister said I don't have a +1 because of seating issues. She did this knowing I have a girlfriend I have to explain this to. I had enough and decided I'm not contributing a dime. I told my parents, and they freaked out. Am I the a-hole? Your sister actively does not want your money. She has made it clear she will still hate you if you contribute your money. She might even hate you more for doing it. And she has gone out of her way to prevent you from bringing your girlfriend, despite the fact that she currently knows you are making a substantial financial contribution towards this. Not the a-hole. She is actively ungrateful for this. You can spend your money in better ways. Not the a-hole. You're 25 years old, and your parents are asking you for $10,000 toward her wedding because they didn't save enough for it. I can't imagine either having a wedding that I, or others who agreed to pay for it, couldn't comfortably afford, or parents asking their child for so much money for something like that, especially for a sister with whom you don't get along, especially not heeding your wishes to not tell your sister, especially after your sister's reaction of your assistance. You're also not the a-hole for your frustrations with your sister, incidentally. Not the a-hole. You tried to do something nice for her, yet it was not appreciated by your sis. Cut her off and let go of this situation. Clearly, she's not willing to let go of the past. I know about narcissistic parents and all of that, but in this case, it's my grandmother who is the narc. She is very vain, very much a big Jesus fan, and is cheap as hell 50% of the time. I'm the favorite grandchild by a long shot. She doesn't like who my aunt married, the mom of my two cousins, and she also doesn't like my cousins' partners. My uncle, grandmother's son, never had children. Grandmother was completely unenthusiastic about her great-granddaughters from cousin A, Cassie, and barely enthusiastic about her great-grandson from cousin B, Laura. She hardly acknowledges any of them, makes disparaging remarks, and barely seems to give a crap about any of them. Me, on the other hand, she'll give me almost anything, including access to her credit card and a bank account she hardly uses. She told me I could buy whatever I wanted as long as it wasn't illegal and it didn't clear out above a certain amount every month. Recently, Cassie's apartment suffered severe fire damage, and Laura had her son this year. She wasn't inclined to help either of them, saying that the fire wasn't her fault, and Laura could handle her own crap. Yet, she will still donate to strangers and favored family members. So, I used that same credit card and bank account. Cassie got a couple $100 towards the GoFundMe set up for her family, and replacements for some of the things the girls lost. Laura got some sweet, sweet baby supplies. Grandmother found out recently, though, and is hopping mad that I used her money to help them. The same money she told me that I could do whatever I wanted with. She's not threatening to cut me off, yet, but she's made her displeasure with me clear. She says I should know better than to help them. I pointed out that she said I could do what I wanted. Am I the a-hole here? Edit. FAQ edition. 1. Why not use gift cards? Give them cash, the gifts directly. We live in different countries. I had intended to go there myself on my own dime earlier this year, but the thing stopped me. 2. Why not use your own money? I kinda did as well. Say I gave Cassie $1,000. 500 of it was my money. I used grandmother's account to give them extra. 3. My relationship with my grandmother. I love her, but despite everything she's done for me, she's also had her foul moods against me as well. She doesn't like it when I call her out on it, but then after she gets it out of her system, it's back to being her usual self. I'm also her PA of sorts, driving, appointments, bills, sometimes with my money when she refuses to pay them, pet care, etc., plus my actual job. 4. Cousins, aunts' relationship with grandmother. Cordial. They send messages, pictures, call occasionally, and visit when they can. She once got mad they couldn't come to visit her because they couldn't afford it at the time. Not the a-hole. Don't hate the player, hate the game. When my grandpa gives me money, I buy something nice for my grandma, his ex-wife, because he beat the crap out of her, and she deserves every cent. Not the a-hole. And that's amazing that you used that privilege for the better to help out your family. I know people in that kind of position that would take advantage and just use it to better themselves. If she makes a big display about this, it's going to make her look awful, so I doubt you'll be in the bad books with other family members. But I do reckon you will be cut off if you don't provide something to her, like help her with groceries, housework, and she needs you around. If you're dependent on her for financial support, I'd suggest making plans. I will say a light yes the a-hole. You didn't do bad by helping out, but you could have withdrew the money and send. She clearly doesn't want to help or look like she helps. There's probably more to that than you know. You should have known better, and she doesn't need to give a reasoning for being mad. My mother-in-law is one of those incestuous mothers who are in love with their sons. When my husband finished school, he moved out as soon as he could for that reason and kept his distance. Well, now that we have a daughter, we both agreed she can spend more time around us for our daughter. She's very good with her, and honestly at first, he saw a difference. She had changed, but lately, she's been making comments and kind of going back to her old ways. Well, yesterday she came over just before my husband came home from work, and since he wasn't around, she thought she could talk crap about my appearance and the mess in my house. I was breastfeeding my daughter, so I just brushed her off. When my husband came home, he came up to me and kissed my and our daughter's foreheads, and asked how are my beautiful girls. Before I could answer, my mother-in-law said she is good, and my daughter's name is okay for now. My husband turned to her and told her that he was talking to me, but is happy to hear she's good too. My mother-in-law then said, as you can see, my name isn't okay. She looks like a mess. Honestly, I was tired and over it, so I told her we're not going to do this, and if she has a problem, she can leave. My house wasn't even a mess. She got upset and started arguing, and then said, give it time, my son will come back to me. Before my husband could say anything, I caught her jealous and weird, and told her her son loves me and picked me. This obviously upset her more, But before she could open her mouth, my husband politely told her to leave. She left after some time. My husband said I said what had to be said, and she won't be allowed back until she learns boundaries and respects me. Since then, my husband's siblings and my father-in-law have been calling and messaging him, calling us both a-holes for how we treated his mom. My husband blocked his family on my phone and said we did nothing wrong, but I kind of feel crappy for ruining things with his other family members that he got along with by being immature and petty. So, am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. You were neither immature nor petty, as you wrote here. Mother-in-law has crossed all kinds of boundaries here, and she needs to understand this. Good for hubby to draw a line and say she won't be allowed back until she respects you. You got a good one there. Congrats. 1. You found yourself a supportive husband. 2. Your mother-in-law knows what not to say or do in your house. 3. You won't be seeing her for some time. I understand you feel guilty, but sometimes things need to be said in order to be able to maintain a healthy relationship with your mother-in-law and the rest of the family. See it as an investment for the future, not the a-hole.